Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of Mosh Talks with me, Beez. New episodes drop every single Tuesday on notfest.com and the Notfest YouTube channel. So if you've been here before, thank you for being with us. And if you haven't, welcome. Basically here, every single week, we aim to bring you the most exciting things from the worlds of rock, metal, punk, hardcore, alternative, everything in between, and everything to do with the culture itself. Because one of the interviews this week is in fact, all of the interviews are exciting. What am I talking about? So why don't I tell you all about who's going to be on the show this week? First up, Matt Heafy from Trivium is going to be here. He was our first ever guest on Mosh Talks, but he's going to be back to talk about A Light or a Distant Mirror. It is Trivium's big streaming event happening on July the 10th, but both myself and he will be along very shortly to tell you more about that. Caleb Shomo from Beartooth is in the studio at the moment right now recording Beartooth's fourth album. He stops recording to talk to us for 15 minutes or so. Loads of exclusives all about the new Beartooth album, so get excited for that. Frank Maddocks is a name that you may not be too familiar with, but you will 100% be familiar with his work because he is the art director for Deftones, and he got his job by being art director on Deftones when he did the artwork and everything else artistically to do with White Pony. That album is celebrating 20 years, so we go inside the art of White Pony with the man who put it together, Frank Maddocks. Josh Middleton from Sylosis is going to be here. One of Britain's best metal exports, Sylosis, are also going to be part of Trivium's big day on July the 10th. And last but not least, Andy Biersack from Black Veil Brides is here. They have re-recorded their debut album, We Stitch These Wounds. I ask him all about that, and he tells us a whole bunch about Black Veil Brides things, including how they nearly split up. But that is all to come. First up, I am joined by Mr. Matt Heafy of Trivium. Yes, July the 10th, A Light or a Distant Mirror is happening. Live.trivium.org to go and get your tickets for what is going to be the global online metal event of the summer. It is a live stream unlike anything you have seen thus far. An arena level production, lights, videos, exclusive music, VIP bundles also available at live.trivium.org. There's going to be a pre-show and a post-show with myself, and in that post-show I am going to be your voice asking questions to Trivium, but you are going to be able to call in and ask Trivium questions yourself. Live.trivium.org for all of the information on A Light or a Distant Mirror. But if you want to know a little bit more from the architect himself, here's Matt Heafy from Trivium, our first guest on this week's Mosh Talks with me, Beez. Okay, you join us kind of laughing because I was just asking, how busy is life at the minute, Matt? So I'll ask for the benefit of everyone else. How busy is life at the minute, mate?
It's weird. Everyone, like, I keep seeing stories. I think it's gone one of two ways. Everyone's either super bored or like furloughed or unemployed right now, or everyone is busier than they've ever been. I am currently busier than I've ever been in my entire life. Let's talk about last week. Last week alone, every morning I was waking up, warming up. As soon as I wake up, get my twins up, my wife and I make them breakfast, get them ready for the day as I do my vocal warm-ups. So I record vocals for my black metal project, Mrityu, with Ishan from Emperor by satellite like this, and then immediately jump into streaming. So then I do my stream and then immediately do some jujitsu. My friend and I have made a pact that we would only train with each other. We have seen no one else in the world other than our own wives and our own babies. So then we do jujitsu, then I jump on for the second vocal recording with Mrityu and the second stream. And then it's off to my kids, get them ready for dinner, bed, dinner, all that stuff. And then over to here as we also plan stuff. And then we added in band practice all last week as well.
And you say all of that and not a word about the event of the summer when it comes to being online and metal, when A Light or a Distant Mirror happening July the 10th. Mate, I know that you have been kind of streaming shows for years, and now we're starting to see, because of the situation that we're in at the moment, other bands are starting to join that, and the vibe of this whole project was to be bigger and bolder. How did the idea develop?
We had been talking about it for a while. Like the original plan before the world shut down was to do something with What the Dead Men Say. And as soon as it came out, we're going to do a live stream show. The idea was always us playing the record from start to finish. And the first idea was us at our practice place. And then we said, let's blow this out a little bit more. So then we're talking to Full Sail, the amazing school that we did our record at. They shoot WWE NXT. That's basically the room that we're shooting our show in. It's the same place that they do that. So it's super equipped, super incredible, great staff, great production company and everything. Then the world shut down. And then we're like, okay, well, so we can't tour on what's hailed as our greatest record ever. That's kind of weird. And we were thinking, what else can we do? So we sort of try to set up a show again, and we realized it was too risky at the time to do that. So we put those plans in the back burner. As everything started to get fixed, we're like, all right, let's talk about this again. Got it all set up. Of course, the world got in a weird place again. But thankfully, the big message with us on this show is that just because we're doing a show, we don't want to show that we feel we're above this pandemic that's happening. But instead, we're taking every single precaution in the practice. At our practice place, it's weird as hell to see. First time I've seen my tour manager and my guitar tech and our security guard in ages, but we have to stay away from each other. We're all wearing masks and we're all keeping our distance and being smart. And that's the way we're going to do this show. The same way we're going to do this show. Everyone at Full Sail has all agreed. For us, and even to be able to do this, we all said everyone has to wear masks and gloves, stay apart from each other, keep this thing very minimal. And obviously, being singers, once we get up on that stage, take it off, play our shows, put it back on, and then we have to leave and be very impersonal with each other. But the main message of the show is that we want to give to our fans again. And with this show, we decided to build staging. So we built custom staging. We actually hired the incredible stage designer, Suna Ray, who has built Muse's stage from the last tour. So she is as good as it gets, and our favorite stage builder, who we never thought we'd be able to work with this soon. Building those carts, they've got integrated video walls into it. We've time coded the entire set, which is something we haven't done before. But we had Josh Wilbur make music in between songs, something that we've never really played with before, but actually have thought out every single detail of this thing and really wanted to blow it out. Multiple cameras, proper audio, not just a collage Zoom, the reality of the Zoom jams is that they have to happen. And it's cool that they're happening, but we wanted to go far beyond that, and we wanted to truly give people what we would give them for a show. And so that's why we decided to make this thing a full-on production with our road crew, with our gear. We're not even using like digital modeling amps anymore. It's like vintage guitar amp heads. The same setup we'd use for a studio setup is what I'm using for guitar, is what Corey's using for guitar. So the audio is going to be top notch, video top notch. Everything's going to be, there will be no stone left unturned for this show. Yeah.
Well, as someone that's been sort of involved on the back end of things at the moment, one of the things that I this is, I'll be frank, Matt, this is the most excited I've been to be part of something since the first time I did television, because it's so fresh, this idea, because the internet is truly interactive. When we're watching you on Twitch, or when we're on Twitch or in any capacity, you really feel like you're hanging out and like you're part of something, and bringing that interactive nature at a time when we can't go to shows and we can't interact. You can interact with everyone in the world. We're doing this pre-show that's going to have a big fight feel, but the post-show afterwards, where you're going to come on and take calls, like, this is more that, while I'm like the sound's going to be amazing and what you're doing with the amps, killer. To me, making this such an interactive event feels different to anything out there.
Absolutely. Yeah, because we've been doing, as you mentioned, we've been live streaming our shows for the last 3 years. Every single show is currently still available on my Twitch. It's for free. You just go and watch it. And what that is just, it's a camera, board feed in. But this one, we wanted to specifically make a show for this, specifically make a show for this exact event, for what's happening, for our forced disconnectivity. And yeah, it's gonna be fantastic. And there is a line of like figuring out what it is, because it's not like my home stream. My home stream is chill and there are jokes and I mess up and we kind of laugh and it's very personable and it's connection. It's not a live show because we're not there together in person. But it's to find what that line is in between, and to have that connectivity and to be able to give. And that was the main thing with this record, with What the Dead Men Say, and with my stream that I do every single day. And Trivium, we want to give people that relief. We know people are currently laid off. We know people are furloughed. We know people are working from home, but watching their kids at the same time, or locked up, trapped up, can't do what they want to do, are stuck. And some people are doing this thing very right. And we keep encouraging that. And that's why we want to keep giving. That's why I do my stream. It's to give people a place to hang out with people, give people a place to have a sense of community while we have to be distant. There's some people that are just locked up in their house by themselves for the last 4 months. And they're feeling that loneliness. And we want to give them a connection, whether through our record, my streams, and now absolutely the show. Bring people together, celebrate life as we can't be together. But my big thing since I was aware of COVID happening was it's about physical distance of people, physically distancing, but keeping social connectivity. Social distancing, I feel like, is the wrong word, and it's been the wrong word since the beginning, but physical distancing is the important word. Keep us physically apart, but socially connect us so we don't feel like we're alone and that we're trapped.
On the day itself as well, it's just going to feel like this moment where I'm here in LA, like you're there in Florida, someone else is watching in the fucking North Pole, like just this moment that we're all together. I wanted to ask you about A Light or a Distant Mirror. Of course, it's a line from the title track of the record. What made it right for this particular project?
I think even when I think about that line now, because what's been great for me in Trivium is that with the last 2 records, Paulo has written a lot of the words, or a lot of the vocal melodies, a lot of the songs. And for me, not even asking him every time what everything means. And that's why with all the interviews I've been pushing, we don't want to tell people exactly what everything means. Instead, we want people to come with their own definitions in there and what they feel the song is. And when I first saw that line, A Light or a Distant Mirror, it's like, I think of the light at the end of the tunnel. I think of that space in between life and death, that space in between reality and imaginary. And is it the light at the end of the tunnel of what all this is? And I feel like symbolically, A Light or a Distant Mirror, this thing is a light for everyone. It's a ray of hope. It's not just something that you're grasping at that is reflecting off yourself. I don't know. I think that he's got a really great way with words, as do Corey and myself with lyrics in the band. And I think that it just felt right. It felt so correct, and it reached out. And he's the one that picked it too, because we're like, what should we call this thing? And he pulled out that line. I was like, there you go, man. Well done.
How have rehearsals been? Because of course this is like going to be part of a Trivium special, like where I've spoken to the other guys literally while they were in their rehearsal in your rehearsal room. How's it been, and how was that first moment where you got to go in and play your first song together? Like, I can imagine was a moment.
It's amazing. I mean, everyone knows me, like everyone that has known me in person knows I'm a hugger. So it's so weird to not be hugging people. Like, it feels wrong, and I'm not hugging people because I've been a champion of doing this thing right since the beginning. It's crazy. From the very first song, it was as if we have not taken a day break since our last tour. I'm so lucky that everyone in this band is as addicted to being good at what they do as I am. Like, it's not just me that puts that rigorous, insane schedule on my abilities, but it's everyone. And it's crazy. At the end of the first practice, we scheduled like 6 hours for day one because we haven't been together in a long time, because it was just about getting monitor mixes and get everything fleshed out. So our crew had everything set so we can get in and play for a couple of hours and figure it out. I think we only played for like 90 minutes, and our tour manager's like, all right, that's good for day one, figuring it was going to take 6 hours. But it's just that the 4 of us love it so much. And by day 2, we were getting the rest of the songs, and day 3, 4, 5, or day 3 and 4, we're playing the set from start to finish, and it was perfect. It was perfect. It was as if we have not taken a single day off since that Australian tour.
So I'm a sucker for big productions, man. Like, I love the big bell in the background when I go to see AC/DC. Like, these things matter. Is this the biggest production Trivium have done to date?
I tried to bring fire into there, but being a university, they're like, we can't have fire on our campus, and we can't use fire on the WWE stage. So no, there's no fire, unfortunately. But it's going to be for the fact that we actually physically had everything built and used our favorite stage designer, and then even figure out the in-betweens, because we've always had our in-betweens really well fleshed out. Like, all right, this is where we hold out our guitars and I talk. This is where we cut off our guitars and I talk or don't talk. But this time we actually had Josh Wilbur create new music that would transition between every single song. So we showed him the set list and we're like, well, can you make what would fit this space from here to here and properly transition us from here to here? Because it's different, because we can't necessarily just like stop a song and have the crowd cheer. That it's going to be silent. It's completely silent, and maybe people clacking on their keyboards or on their iPhones. But it was thinking out all those details. The thing that I just look forward to is being able to have that direct one-on-one and knowing that everyone is essentially doing what you and I are doing right now. They're just like, all right, we're home. We're still trying to figure out how to be functioning, connected people of civilization. And I think that's such a good thing. I think it's going to be very good for people's mentality to be able to talk to one another, be like, hey, there are other human beings here with me. I'm not alone right now. And that even makes you think of some of the lyrics from What the Dead Men Say, just that whole idea. And so this record's crazy. I was just talking to my friend who called me. It's actually Korn's security guard, Big Sleep. We're buddies, and we've been buddies for years. I gave him and Head a yoga lesson way back on a Mayhem tour we did together, and he just wanted to call just to catch up and just talk about stuff. And we were talking about like how good it is to be able to catch up with another person, how good it is to be able to hear from someone else, just to have someone check up on you. I thought that was so amazing. He just wanted to call just to be like, hey, how you doing, man? And then we're just catching up on life. So I feel like that's what this show is going to do. It's going to allow people to come together for something that I don't want to say it's irrelevant. It's not the right word, but it's kind of the greater cause is bringing people together for one common love. Like, where we could be a restaurant, we could be food, we could be a show, we could be whatever it is. But the fact that we're able to bring people together and have that connectivity and that positivity and that looking forward to something, that's what we all need as a civilization. That's what we need as a people. That's what I know I need in my life. And I'm happy that we get to, once again, at least in the last 4 months of all this planet being what it is, being able to give people the record, the streams, and this show. And I was telling Sleep as well that it's crazy looking at this record, because as I look at this record and I look at the themes of what this record is, it's as if we wrote this during this. It's as if we wrote this within this last 2, 3, 4 weeks, but we didn't. We wrote it before. We wrote it like a year and a half before. But the fact that it fits in right now, I don't know. It's eerie. It's all sorts of things. But I'm glad we're able to get it out of our system and hopefully able to get it out of the systems of our fans, and that we can show our fans our belief system. And our belief system has always been fighting for everyone's right to live on this planet together, as long as we're not hurting another. Like, I've always been a champion for everyone and for everything, ever since Ascendancy, ever since Declaration. We've been very clear about the fact that we are champions and we fight for people to be able to just live and to love and to be loved. And that's what our music is about. That's what the community is about. That's what our band is about. It's about bringing all of that together.
Yeah, and it being truly global means anyone anywhere can be part of that. And so, like, the art is such a massive part of What the Dead Men Say. They wouldn't let you have fire. But is this event about kind of playing, like, I don't mean to say playing the medium, but like knowing how you're broadcasting and making that experience the best it can be, rather than like, you know, what we're used to from an arena production, like fire. Fire's great when you can feel the blast of the heat when you're there, but this is about bringing something unique within this medium the way we're doing this.
Absolutely. And I've been so fortunate in that when I took the gamble and the risk to jump over to Twitch, and it was Paulo, he was the first person 3 years ago that said, when I was like, I'm going to try maybe YouTube, he's like, why don't you try Twitch instead? And he was the one that inspired that, just that little conversation. And with that happening, and to be able to do these shows and to be able to really learn the medium and now become the champion for even Twitch. I mean, when you go to help.twitch.tv, it's a bunch of videos of me explaining what Twitch is and how to stream and what the ethos of live streaming is. And I've always shown and explained that it's about that two-way connectivity. It's about streamer community, streamer viewers. It's that direct interaction and correlation. So knowing that going into this, it is different. It is a different approach than trying to get people to do something, because that's when you typically feed off of that. So It's a medium that I feel incredibly comfortable in. My band does as well. And I think that from all the home streams, I really do. I won't be able to have the chat room right in front of my face, which would be cool. Maybe we can figure something out on that.
But you are going to come on and chat afterwards, which is
absolutely
mad. Like,
absolutely.
So a final question from me, because I know how busy you are at the moment, but you mentioned your project with Ishan. And I couldn't help but notice on your Instagram today that you were talking about finishing vocals. This project has been touted for so long. Are we nearing the completion of this project, Matt Heafy?
I have always loved black metal. I started kind of working on ideas of this in 2009, but the real idea of Mritu started in, I believe, 2010. So it won't come out till next year. So it would have been 11 years, taken longer than Chinese Democracy, but it'll be better than Chinese Democracy. And it would have costed about 1/100,000th the amount of Chinese Democracy. It's incredible. Today was the final vocal trackings. I actually sang in Japanese for all the verses in the pre-chorus of the song, which is very difficult. And it's amazing. So yeah, it'll be 11 years in the making when it finally comes out. It's incredible to be able to do this with one of my all-time musical heroes. I mean, Ishan started off as a hero who became a mentor, who became one of my closest friends in the world. So it's amazing to be able to kind of show off that other musical muscle that I've always loved so much.
Are we going to hear the vocal muscles being taken in different directions, Matt?
Ishan's challenge to me was, he's like, I know you've been doing Trivium the way you've been doing it forever, but my idea to you, didn't say a request or demand, but he's like, my challenge to you is that you don't scream this at all like you scream Trivium ever, and you don't sing this at all like you've sung Trivium. I was like, that's all I know how to do. He's like, you'll figure it out. So I had to figure out a completely the opposite. I'm doing the opposite of everything I did on Trivium on this. It was hard to do.
Right, I will leave it at that because, you know, I don't want to spoil any more surprises. The next time I will see your lovely smiling face will be July the 10th. Don't forget, live.trivium.org is the place to go and get tickets. A Light or a Distant Mirror is happening July the 10th. Honestly, you have never been part of anything like this. We'll see you July 10th. Matt, see you then, mate, and good luck with rehearsals and everything, and I'll see you on the day. Thank you so much for having me part of your big day as well.
Oh, yeah, man. Thank you for being a part, man. Love you, dude. Take care, man.
I am not kidding you one bit. That streaming event is going to be unlike anything you have ever been a part of. July the 10th, A Light or a Distant Mirror, live.trivium.org to get your tickets. Come and join me in the pre-show, get in the hype building. Sylosis are going to be playing, going to be talking to Josh a little bit later on, and of course, be there for the post-show. We're going to be taking your calls, so get thinking of questions for Trivium, and we'll see you July the 10th for A Light or a Distant Mirror. Next up, Caleb Shomo from Beartooth, and Beartooth have been on an absolute tear. It is amazing to think that it was only 6 years ago that Beartooth released their debut album. Here they are 4 years later working on album number 4. Work is very, very underway, as Caleb is about to tell you. I've got to say, if you haven't checked them out, their latest album, Disease, is absolutely banging. Their debut album, Disgusting, as well. Both really incredible. They managed to take the kind of hardcore and groovy hardcore played by the likes of Every Time I Die with a little rock and roll in the riffing and infuse it with just choruses meant for fields full of people. They really have done brilliant things in recent years, Beartooth, and I'm excited for album number 4. Here's Caleb to tell you why you should be excited too. So, you set tongues a-wagging last week by showing footage of you somewhat in the studio, Caleb Shomo. How's life going?
It's good, man. Been working a lot, just getting this record going, and I don't know. I just have a lot of songs now. I've been starting to track drums, started doing some mixing. It's all like really coming together, man. It's cool.
So, this is a fascinating time to be asking you this, because I don't know if everybody knows this, but like, you isolate to make your records anyway. Like, Beartooth albums are made by you.
Yeah.
This is isolation within isolation. Has the current world climate been affecting music, or was this done beforehand? Where are we at as far as that's concerned?
So I worked on a lot of this album on the road, a whole lot of this record. And I mean, we honestly could not have been luckier with kind of the way our record cycle laid out. And I mean, the Disease tour in Europe was our last tour of the cycle, and that finished on March 6th, I believe. And then like next week, everything got shut down. So we already planned to kind of take most of this year off. Obviously, we planned on not taking it all off. Like we're probably gonna have to, but yeah. So I had already worked on a ton of the record, just writing out on the road. Brought a studio rig out there, and that was great. And when it first started, like the whole lockdown thing, I just kind of emotionally shut down for like a month. But then I just kind of like caught a second wind probably like 2 or 3 months ago, or probably like 2 months ago, and I've just been ripping through songs, and yeah, I mean it's pretty cool. I guess I'll say it on here because why not? But about a week ago, I sent kind of like my first like draft one of the record to the higher ups, and yeah. But I mean, I'm still just gonna keep on writing. We got plenty of time, but record's going very, very well so far.
Was there a moment that where you turned on that dime? If the first month was rough, like one of the things that I always feel close to you as an artist is that you really put your heart out there and you talk about like how one feels within themselves. If that first month was tough, I won't prod too much on that, but like the moment where things turned, what was there a specific moment, or was it just your mood elevated?
Yeah, I mean it was just kind of like this thing clicked where, 'cause I mean at first I was just kind of emotionally like shut off when this whole lockdown thing happened. I was just like anybody else, just bummed out and confused and just trying to like fight through it. And then I don't know, just a switch kind of flipped, and I just was like, you know what, fuck this. I'm just gonna start working. And I like got down. I kind of like rebuilt my studio a little bit. I like did a bunch of soundproofing and got some new gear and just some stuff to try and like kind of get me in the mood to start writing again and like really start working. And after doing that, I just hit a stride and yeah, just started busting out song after song. And also on the road, I couldn't track any vocals because I had to save my voice for our set every night. So after I tracked like the first 2 or 3 songs of vocals, that got me really pumped up. So I just started going and going and going, and yeah, got a more than a record's worth of full finished songs now, which is pretty cool.
So, I guess inside making a record in this environment, like, I'll be honest with you, getting this show, I've been doing this show like 3-4 weeks, and I've found it like a real sanctuary away from the real world. Just being totally honest, like with everyone. Yeah. Like, have you found that? Have you found that in making the 4th Beartooth record?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. I mean, just like, I don't know. The fact that I honestly was kind of like blessed enough to have the time to have all the time line up with this lockdown, to be able to just like make a record. And the fact that, I kind of decided that on this album, I wanted to just go back to my roots of just like isolating myself in a basement and making an album, and not really doing the like travel and do a bunch of co-writing and all that, just like trying to kind of capture some of that magic from the first record. So yeah, I mean, being able to just like have my own world down there, and I mean, it helps me not focus on the forced isolation when I'm just kind of like choosing to do it anyway. So I don't know, it's definitely helped out.
I hear ya. So like I'm lucky enough to have been around all things Beartooth since the very beginning. Even before you got your record deal, I was playing your shit on the radio in the UK. So I say this as a fan, particularly of Disgusting and Disease, the last record, which I think is fucking great. When you go into a 4th record, The only thing that I look at for Beartooth is, do you ever worry about a formula? Because you do everything yourself and it's all internal and all the rest of it. Do you ever worry about a formula? And is that something that you've toyed with on the fourth record?
A little. I mean, a little bit. I think that something about the Beartooth sound, like, is sort of that formula, and it's trying to ride that line of, Beartooth has a song structure. I mean, it's the classic pop structure of, like, intro, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, out. But with this one, I've just been trying to amp up everything, because with the last record, I really wanted to go for that super raw, like, live rock and roll in, like, the old school studio on the old school console sound. And it was rad, and I loved doing it. And it was like a proving to myself that I can make a real record without computers, like, as well, heavily relying on computers. But I don't know. I just kind of realized, like, what? That's what I learned, as a producer. It's like I came up in the era of mixing in the box and recording in the box, which means using plugins and emulations and things like that. And obviously there's live amps and there's live drums and whatnot. But I don't know. I've just been kind of like using that to try and push it a little further. And the formula is still there, but I don't think it's in a bad way. I think it's the formula that people want from a Beartooth record. But I think it's, this one's just jacked. Like, everything is amped up to 11. I am so pumped about, obviously this is what you want to think when you're making a record, but, like, damn, this is the best one yet. Like, not even close. This is the heaviest record. This is my best work. Like, the most proud I've been of these songs. It's wild, man. It's some heavy duty shit,
mate. I love seeing you this amped. And the thing is, there is nothing wrong to there being a song structure and that kind of thing. Like, I don't want AC/DC doing dubstep drops, right? Like, sometimes, like, and when you say you're pushing things heavier and going back to the way that you were thinking on the original record.
Yeah.
Can I ask just how that's manifested itself before I let you get back to, finishing this thing off?
Yeah. The easiest way I've been trying to explain this record to people without giving too much away is, like, if Disease was AC/DC, this record's like Black Sabbath. Like, it's a lot more influenced in, like, dark stoner rock, like, heavy, like, power groove. Obviously there's still, like, a lot of fast and some punk rock and all that, but I've really been exploring with, like, the stoner metal side of guitars and guitar tones, and, like, doing different tunings and like, lots of fuzz and chaos, and just, like, layering the fuck out of my guitar tracks. And the whole point for me of this mix and, like, the sonics of this record is as big and loud and fucking sonically devastating as I can possibly get it. So, like, on a breakdown, for example, it's like, okay, well, there's where on Disease it would just be left guitar, right guitar, bass down the middle. This is literally, I've done, like, that little clip I posted is fucking, I think, like, 8 guitars, 3 bass tracks, like, just trying to just experiment, just doing dumb stoner shit and just, like, trying my fucking best. But yeah, that's the goal, is just sonic devastation for sure.
So, well, I hope I don't get anyone in trouble here, but I can kind of back this up because you were playing demos when I was in the room with you on the Motionless in White tour. So I will back you up as I heard some devastating shit. Final question then. Are we likely to hear any new Beartooth in 2020? I know that I know that it's like it's hard to predict any future at the moment, but yeah,
Right.
I have to ask.
I would say yes. I would say for sure. I mean, we got, again, like I said, we got so lucky with the timing of everything. And originally we were going to try and put the record out in 2020. I don't know if that's just going to be possible because, like, we had so many plans with tours and, you know, like this epic rollout that we don't want to take away from anybody. So we're definitely going to wait until we can do it right. And not just kind of like rush out a record and then nobody sees Beartooth for another year and a half because shit went south. But I would be shocked if there weren't at least like one single to 4 singles in 2020. If I was guessing, something in that range. Yeah.
We'll take that, man. We'll take it. So we look forward to some new Beartooth in 2020, mate. Stay safe, and I will see you when there is new music to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. Thanks for having me on, man. Always fucking good talking to you, brother.
Love that, man. And I could not be more excited to hear what Caleb is coming up with. The 4th Beartooth album in the middle of being recorded as we speak. We will keep you up to date. Caleb's going to come back on the show when there actually is new music. So make sure you're subscribed and you know to be here for new episodes every single Tuesday. Okay, next up. White Pony is one of my favourite albums of all time. Legit, of all time. It is one of the most brilliant, inventive, thinking outside of the box, career-defining albums from one of the best bands, in my opinion, to ever plug into amplification. That band are Deftones. But you know what furthers the mystique and the love for White Pony? Is all of the imagery that comes with it. It's impossible to hear the words White Pony without thinking of that pony, that album cover, those photo shoots. How do you come up with an album cover that is truly iconic? I can't imagine Number of the Beast having a different cover, can you? I can't imagine White Pony having a different cover. What was it like to come up with it? How did they come up with it? I thought I knew everything about Deftones' White Pony. This interview told me that I didn't. Here he is, art director for Deftones, Frank Maddocks, the man behind the art from White Pony, with myself, Beez, here on Mosh Talks. So, I am now joined by Deftones art director Frank Maddocks. Mate, I've been looking forward to this interview all week. What had you been doing? So you started working with Deftones on White Pony, is that right?
I did. That was my first record with them.
So what had you been doing prior to working with Deftones, and had you done much in the realm of music or heavy music?
So prior to that, I just got my job at Warner Brothers at the time, and I knew that Deftones were coming out with a new record. I was a huge fan. I bought Adrenaline the day it came out, and was a fan ever since, going to a lot of shows. So being at Warner Brothers, we were closely tied with the other label, which was Maverick, which Deftones were on. So I kind of raised my hand at Warner's, and I was like, I would love to work on this record. I know that it's coming, and I want to work on it. So, fortunately enough, I was able to get the job. The art director at Maverick sent my work to the band and management, and they liked it. So I was able to jump on board and work with them on White Pony.
So I heard. So I've been interviewing Deftones since 2002, and I feel like I've asked them every White Pony question there is to ask in that time. But with yourself, am I right in saying that you had the pony logo first?
So the pony logo was something that the band had,
right.
And you may have heard them recently talking about it. They actually they had this great idea of kind of this concept record for White Pony. And when I first reached out to them, I actually had that information as well. And my first meeting with them, they kind of had some loose concepts about what White Pony was, and just kind of like this overall mystery about having this icon and what it could lead to. And they actually did have the pony. So in one of my initial meetings, somehow via email or something, I received the little horse, which is now the the icon that's gone on to be so influential and everything. But they did have that idea, and they had the icon, and they'd even done some tour backdrops before they even started making the album. For one of their tours, I think on Ozfest or something, that was like this big red banner, and they had the pony, and then Deftones kind of small. So they definitely had the ideas planted early.
See, so who drew the pony? Do you know?
I gotta say, I think it's a mystery. It's between all of us, we can't quite recall how it came about. But certainly 20 years ago, it was just kind of this mysterious image, and I think that had we used it at face value, I think it would have been one thing. But I think what we did with it, we really kind of like took it and ran with it, and took it to a different level.
So when you put together, because you've worked with Deftones now on every record since White Pony, like at what point, specifically on White Pony, at what point did you start to hear music? Because it's obvious that the music and the artwork has to go hand in hand. When did you first start hearing music for White Pony and start putting together the art concept?
That's a great question. And one I'm not asked a lot, which is a really good question. My first meeting with them, I flew up to Sausalito to meet with the guys. And whenever I kind of approach a project, I always like to try to do stuff beforehand to present to them. So I arrived with some early kind of like ideas that I had. I was already incorporating the pony into some things. It was really like clean design, but I hadn't heard anything yet. So that day they played me some songs with Terry in the studio. And obviously I was blown away. I don't recall what songs they were. It wasn't the whole album, but it was incredible. And then went back to Los Angeles, continued to work on some stuff. And then I received a CD that was more tracks. Was fortunate to go into the studio again and hear them doing Teenager at Larrabee, which is in Los Angeles. And then Teenager, if you know that song, like is so different than anything we'd heard from Deftones at that point. So that was like such a trippy experience going in and hearing that. It was like, wow, this thing is just like kind of getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then I did receive a blank CD with handwritten notes on it that is the whole record later. And I was just completely blown away.
So, like, when I think of Deftones and how the art and the music go hand in hand, like, Gore, sonically, is a very different record to Diamond Eyes, and therefore, from a design point of view, very, very, very different. I guess the question that I really want to ask you is, how do you see sound? Like, how do you come up with the visual aspect to a record and to a record like White Pony?
So, in working with them in general, it runs the gamut. Like sometimes I'm able to hear music early on, and that kind of informs things. Sometimes it's a conversation with the band and Chino about like, what is the vibe? Like, what is the direction? A lot of the times it comes down to like feelings and words and concepts that he gives me. Sometimes he has an idea. Chino has an idea of what he'd like to do for the cover. Many times there's not an idea, and we kind of I just start riffing on stuff and making things. And the times where it marries up with the music, I think that's about, the relationship with the band and kind of understanding where they're at a certain time. Getting to hear some music definitely informs that. With Gore, I was able to hear music prior, and then Chino had the idea about the flamingos, so it was just about implementing that. With Diamond Eyes in particular, I don't think I heard anything, but it was just about wanting to create another kind of iconic, powerful image. And then White Pony was the most probably involved of all of them, where it was like I just kind of described. It was like receiving bits of music, sending images back and forth, kind of having an idea beforehand. I wanted to take it in this really clean aesthetic, very different from what was happening at the time. And maybe kind of a little unexpected. And I think the music was going there too. So that was a nice marriage of kind of just the visuals and the music progressing at the same time. And everybody kind of firing on all cylinders.
So you say feelings, concepts, and words,
Yeah.
and I know I'm taking you back 20 years now.
Yeah.
Do you remember any of those feelings, concepts, and words that were specific to White Pony?
You know, I don't necessarily in regards to White Pony, and only because we had the kind of the title and the icon going into it. So at that point, it was just about what's the aesthetic that I'm bringing to it. You know, Chino's always been interested in things kind of like being classy and sexy, and against the kind of like perception that it's, you know, aggro and hardcore. Like, things we've tried to do with the band is always tried to be kind of just like a level up and just very clean and beautiful. So I think there was talk about that. You know, the overall concept was kind of just we wanted to create a little bit of mystery, almost like a propaganda style, like, you know, kind of what is the White Pony, what's it talking about, who, you know, who's behind it type of thing. So I think that was kind of more the vibe.
So I wanted to ask as well, because at the time, White Pony as a record was such a departure for Deftones, but also it was so the antithesis of what was going on at the time, so against the grain, right? So when Deftones were coming out with White Pony, like, it couldn't be more different to, you know, Kid Rock and being all about the nookie and those kind of things.
Totally.
And I love me some Biscuit, man, like fully unapologetically. But from a design point of view, with Biscuit on Significant Other having that big graffiti art and so bold and brash and in your face, and Deftones musically were bringing in the bits of DJ Shadow or Massive Attack and things like that were going on that were a bit more adult and contemporary at the time. Was the design to be the antithesis of the time and go completely against the grain?
I think that in hindsight, it definitely was. I think, you know, I think they definitely had that idea. I had that idea with maybe without even knowing it. But yeah, we've always wanted to do things differently, you know, not follow the herd. You know, if there's ever a time where we can be left of center, we try to do that. And I think with that record for sure, like, I think it was a good marriage of like, I was interested in that kind of like approach at the time, and it really fit well with what the band wanted to do. And then when they made this record that was so kind of monumental and different, then things really started to be like, okay, yeah, you've got like these bands over here doing this thing, and then we've got these guys, Deftones, doing what they're doing. So I think it really worked out.
So 2 last questions.
Yeah.
First one, imagine Master of Puppets with a different album cover. Can't, can you? Like,
not at all.
That is entirely how an entire generation plus feel about White Pony. Like, is that a head fuck to come to terms with as a designer, that something you've put out there? I mean, obviously, it's helped by the fact that the record is a classic amongst classics, but to have created something like that's got to be a head fuck.
It's cool, you know. It's almost like I didn't know any better. Like, you know, putting the pony very small in the corner was kind of like one of my first kind of thoughts. I have some other comps where like it's larger, and there's more things going on, and you know, so if it's almost like not knowing what you're going into, like not knowing that record was going to be as huge. You know, for me, it was already like a huge thing because I was such a fan of the band. So getting to work with them was already like, I've already like, you know, made it. It's amazing. So, you know, there's all those kind of like things to overcome, and you have to just trust your instincts. Like, I think if you think about it on the outside and you say, this is going to be this huge record and you have to do something so amazing and people are going to talk about it 20 years later, then you kind of just get frozen. So I was, you know, I'm lucky in the fact that like, I just was kind of young and naive and just went into it, like thinking what would be the best thing to do. But yeah, it's pretty amazing, to to have people look back on it and reflect on it like that, and all the tattoos. And, you know, I mean, I feel really blessed to have been a part of it, and to have people kind of like really understand what we were going for, you know?
Like, what makes it so timeless, do you think?
I think you kind of nailed it. Like, I think, you know, and I've said this in the past, I think everything came together. It was an amazing album. You know, good imaging, a great time for the band, a great time for music. And I think people just really could grasp the concept. I think it was, a solid icon. It was like, you know, you saw it and you remembered it. I think honestly, it has a lot to do with the music. It's like, you know, if an album is memorable and makes an impression, then, you know, pretty much automatically the visuals that go along with it are going to be regarded. But you know, coming to understand that people really, you know, enjoyed looking through the CD booklet and seeing how we married up the like kind of gritty textures and kind of more punk rock DIY approach on the inside mixed with the kind of clean aesthetic outside is nice. Like, people really took the time. It made a dent. Like, I have people hitting me on Instagram all the time, like saying, "You're the reason I got into design. You know, you're the reason I quit my job and went to art school." And those comments are like, you know, mind blowing. Like, you know, I was that same guy looking through liner notes and stuff. So it's pretty amazing.
And you went completely the other way with Back to School. Like, completely the other way. When the EP came out and the art was kind of cartoony but still totally different to everything at the time, because it was embracing like a bit of Japanese culture and some other things that was going on there. Like to turn on a dime when you had something so successful at the time, crazy.
Well, what's funny about that is that was a tour poster that we did for that tour, and I hired this illustrator to come up with like the kind of like cheerleader person. I designed the rest of it. Deftones, Incubus, and Taproot, I think it was. But then they made it into like a, you know, a promo or an EP type of situation. Took the cover up, which I thought was cool. It wasn't intended to be a cover, only a tour poster, but it worked.
Yeah. That tour in the UK was Linkin Park and Taproot.
Okay, Linkin Park. Okay.
So, final question then. I wanted to ask you about, because you are still on the cusp of like exactly where design is right now, and I love seeing that. I love seeing that applied to heavy music. So I love the Higher Power record anyway. But the art is so 2020. It couldn't be further away from Skulls, Fire, and Motorbikes, right? So what's your take on where imagery is within heavy music in 2020, good and bad?
My take is that it's amazing. Like, I'm more inspired by that stuff than I've ever been. I think that like there's no boundaries anymore. I'm really into. I mean, Instagram is a great platform for visuals and seeing what's out there, and I think bands have really embraced that. And I feel like there's really no boundaries. I'm like more inspired now than I've ever been on the artwork that's happening, and you know, I think it's quite amazing. And it's actually funny to see how other bands have adapted what are traditionally, you know, heavy metal type of, or, you know, metal or rock aesthetics. You know, I feel like the genres are so blurred now, you know, like go on Spotify and you could see an album by, you know, Travis Scott or somebody, not Travis Scott because he's not doing that, but, you know, any urban hip hop or whatever. And it's got visuals that could be for any, kind of metal band or anything. So I think it's great.
Do you think it's all bleeding into one? It's kind of how streaming culture made us less tribal as listeners, right? You used to have to buy all music, so you were kind of like, I like metal or I like this.
Yeah.
Like where everything's blurred into one another. Is that true of design as well?
I think so, man. And I think it's more inspiring than ever. Yeah. And I think that's the way it should be. I think that's what's so cool about right now is that there's no boundaries. You know, and I keep trying to do that. I'm like more passionate about art and design and photography now than I've been in 20 years. And I just want to, you know, keep doing it.
Frank, honestly, mate, it's an absolute honour having you on the show today. On behalf of everyone who has got those Deftones tattoos, like, thank you for your work over the year, man.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you reaching out, and I honestly appreciate talking about it and being recognized. It's an amazing part of my life, so thank you.
There he was, Frank Maddocks, art director for Deftones. What an awesome job title, but I'm fascinated by how imagery changes in the world of heavy music. If you haven't checked out his artwork for the Higher Power album that came out on Roadrunner Records earlier in this year, do so. And make sure you're following him on Instagram, at Frank Maddocks. Honestly, such a talented guy, and it's really cool to see modern design being given the heavy music treatment. So good stuff, Frank. All right, my next guest, I go back to good old Blighty, to my home country of the United Kingdom, to talk to Josh Middleton of Sylosis, and also Architects, I should point out, because Josh Middleton has been one of the best guitar players in metal, certainly in the UK, I would argue in the world. This guy absolutely shreds. And if you like Trivium, and you like how Trivium kind of take all of the best elements of various different types of metal and throw it all together to make their own kind of cacophonous sound, Sylosis do a whole bunch of that on their new album, Cycle of Suffering. If you haven't checked it out, make sure you do so. Sylosis, the reason that Josh is on the show this week, are going to be playing 5 songs supporting Trivium. July the 10th, A Light or a Distant Mirror. You can get all 5 songs and the Trivium set and the pre-show and the post-show, live.trivium.org. And here is why you should care about Sylosis. Josh Middleton on Mosh Talks with me, Beez. Very privileged to be joined by Josh from Sylosis. How's life back in Blighty, mate?
It's hot. It's really hot today, to be honest. Yeah, I think it's the 2 hottest days of the year so far. So, yeah, but all good. All good. How about you?
First time for everything, isn't there?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So you're going to be part of our big Trivium event. So being from the UK and having loads of mates back home that are full-blown, die-hard, if you say something bad about Sylosis, it's like you've just said something bad about their mother type fans.
Oh, cool.
And this being a complete global event, is this a really brilliant chance to get Cycle of Suffering out to everybody and get a chance to play these shows? I know the circumstances are insane, but when you get to take your new music out to everyone everywhere, is it still able to conjure the excitement?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, yeah, it's, I guess, maybe even more so than playing regularly, because, I mean, like, there's no limitations. Like, everyone in the whole world could potentially watch if they wanted. So, yeah, I mean, it was a shame. This was like a little bit of downtime from Architects. So we had, Sylosis had like a select bunch of festivals that we wanted to do this year and that we can't do now. So it was kind of a shame that like doing some shows on this album wasn't going to happen. So yeah, like doing this is awesome for that reason. And yeah, like you say, it's I think the potential of like exposure to more people than we would have been playing to anyway, potentially.
So with this new record, and have you been actually together playing? When you're doing this set, are you going to be in the room together, or is this going to be quarantined, or how is this going to work, man?
No, we'll be in the room. Yeah, we'll be. I mean, it's like a couple of weeks away now, and like by that point, I think as of the 4th of July here, like some of the restrictions change a bit again. But I mean, it's just something that we can't really avoid. So yeah, the four of us will be playing in a room. We won't. I don't know if we'll have been able to like rehearse as a band, but luckily, everyone in the band's a really good musician. So I think that we can practice on our own at home, and when we come together, it's just fine. I'm so chuffed for you, Josh, because your life is guitars to the point that literally there is a rack of them behind you as we talk right now. Oh, exactly.
Has it killed you, lockdown? Has it been a nightmare, like, for not being able to do what is essentially, like, I associate you with your instrument more than just about every other musician I know.
Yeah, potentially. To be honest, like, lockdown's been great for me. I can't complain at all. Like, but I have a 1-year-old daughter. Well, my daughter turned 1 during lockdown in April, and it normally my day revolves around being in here, which is like a home studio, working on music, all sorts of stuff to do with both bands that I'm in. And because of my wife not being able to go out and do all the stuff she normally does with our daughter, I've been forced to be like, you know, put more hours in for dad mode, which has been amazing. But I've actually been playing and writing even less than I would normally before that. Whereas most people, like a lot of people I know, especially that don't have kids who are being like furloughed, are like, oh, I'm so bored. And I'm like, oh, if I had the time, I'd be writing so much more music right now. But yeah, and then obviously the fact that like Sylosis were about to do some shows, like we did a comeback show, which was cool. But we had a bit more festivals. It was looking forward to just, you know, doing some of that stuff. But I can't complain. Like lockdown for me, it has been great. Like, you know, more time with my daughter and stuff. So no complaints.
So, July the 10th, A Light or a Distant Mirror, you're going to be providing the support for Trivium, right? One of the things that I've really loved about the last 2 Trivium records is it feels like a real a collection and hybrid of so many different subgenres within the walls of metal that still come together and create like a sound that is uniquely Trivium's. But you can hear so much of what's going on in metal right now in it. And when I listen to Cycle of Suffering, I think Meshuggah fans could like it. I think Testament fans could like it. Some of the breakdown and mosh calls are so hard they could be on a Hatebreed record. Does it feel like a really cool opportunity to bring that to people? And what I really wanted to ask was, is that a reflection of you and how much like different sorts of metal you're into and that you absorb and put out into your music when it comes to Sylosis?
Yeah, 100%. And like more so with Cycle of Suffering, the new album, because I think when we first started gaining traction and releasing music, you know, 2006 or whenever, metalcore started like becoming like, you know, the thing that everyone was doing. And I think I sort of had this knee-jerk reaction of like, well, you know, I grew up listening to all this thrash stuff, but I also loved, you know, Poison the Well and Kill Switch and stuff like most people my age would have done, like loads of bands like Terror, like loads of hardcore. But I kind of deliberately was like, no, we need to separate ourselves from what's going on, and like we're going to tune our guitars up and not play like obvious breakdowns and stuff. And now that I'm older, like I you know, back in the day I was kind of like, right, we need to pick a lane and we're just going to like appeal to the more like metallic fan base. But like that kind of is like chopping off like a limb, because I listen to all kinds of music, and like obviously I'm in Architects, which is a very different sounding band, and like loads of people might be like kind of surprised, or at least when I first joined. But like, yeah, I love like Deftones, obviously. I've always loved Architects and been friends with them for a long time. I like, you know, Jim Eat World. Like I like so many different types of music. So I feel like our new album's definitely just a bit more like, okay, who cares like what people might think? Like this is just what we want to do, and it's like what is fun and exciting to play. And yeah, with Trivium as well. Like I think me and Matt are like pretty much the same age, and I feel like we both probably grew up like listening to all the same stuff. Like all the bands that I grew up listening to as a kid that were like thrash and death metal were like, there was loads of Florida bands. They're from Florida, love like early Metallica and that kind of thing. But also, again, like I said, like bands like Killswitch or whoever. So I think we have a very similar pool of influences as well.
What have you been listening to during lockdown, man? Like during lockdown, I've got a real musical boner for Polyphia. Like I'd never really given them the attention they deserve. That guy rips.
Right, I can't say I'm too familiar with them. I've been listening to like the New Testament album has been fun. Going back over, just listening to a lot of old Deftones. The new Loathe record is awesome. Yeah, I've been listening to it like podcasts, like when I'm doing the washing up. So, but I'm trying to write with the moments that I do get to like work on music. I'm obviously trying to write as much as I can in the time that I have. So I'm more just kind of like focusing on just writing and working on new stuff.
And not to put pressure on you here at all, mate, but having an opportunity like this in the UK right now, there is so much brilliant heavy music being made. It's funny, man. Like the first two names that I wrote down when I was like, right, this band and this band and this band were Bleed From Within, because the new record is amazing, and While She Sleeps. And it dawned on me that I saw you three play a show together at the Underworld years and like literally over a decade ago.
Yeah, you did.
And here we are, like still at the forefront of it, but being joined by the likes of Conjurer and Employed to Serve and Venom Prison and You Said Loathe. Like there's so many sick bands. Does it feel like the UK are really doing something important in the world of heavy music at the moment?
Yeah, I think so. And I think especially like the list of bands you just gave, it's so diverse. And obviously like Conjurer, like Connor, our new bass player in Sylosis, is in Conjurer as well. Ali, our drummer, is in Bleed From Within. So it's quite incestuous as well. Yeah, for sure. Like I feel like there's a lot of difference as well in all those bands. Like I mean, I already just said that, but that's something that's really cool. There's just so much variety. And like I don't know if there's obviously not like a huge amount of bands, because obviously we're a very small country by comparison to like the US, but the bands that do stand out, it's like no one's really doing the same thing or in the same way, which is cool. And like us Bleed From Within and While She Sleeps, obviously the Architects are all still going and Bring Me, it's great to see.
And so people will lynch me if I don't ask about Architects. And I think this is like, we've hung out loads, but like, I think this is the first actual interview we've done since you've been in Architects.
Yeah,
so,
probably.
Like, I thought Holy Hell was a massive triumph. I was so chuffed for you all that it did so much around the world as well. So I'd be remiss to say you were probably at the end of that album cycle. Has work begun on New Architects?
So to answer the first part of your question, we'd pretty much wrapped it up anyway. Like the last show we did on Holy Hell we did Unify Festival in Australia. And we're very fortunate that we didn't have anything planned during this period, which is such a relief, because a lot of bands have had to cancel their tours and crew not getting paid or, no money coming in. And we'd sort of planned for this time off. So we're very fortunate. In terms of new stuff, I mean, me and Dan, I think, are both the same in that there's never a writing period. It's just we write music all the time because it's just what we love, and like that. The creative side of the band is just like so important as well. So it's kind of like we're just always going to be working on new stuff. But well, hopefully, we'll do some stuff.
Are we at the full song stage, or are we at the piecing together stage?
Oh, it's a mixture. Yeah, I mean, there's also there'll be songs where there might be a full song, but it might also never make it to the album. So, I mean, there was songs like there must have been about 4 songs that didn't make it to Holy Hell, but those ones, it's kind of like that was then. So you just kind of move on, that kind of thing.
So are you constantly in touch with the guys during lockdown?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, they're like, some of my best friends. So I'll FaceTime Sam, nearly every other day, a lot of the time. So yeah.
Give him all my best when you him all my best when you speak to him next. Tell Sam that I'm very jealous of Bruno Fernandes being at Man United, and it'll be a pleasure for us to link up again. July the 10th, Sylosis supporting Trivium on A Light or a Distant Mirror. It is the global metal event of the summer. Don't forget, you can get tickets live.trivium.org. Check out the new Sylosis record, Cycle of Suffering. I love Disintegrate on that record, man. It's so big. So good, man. I'm so chuffed for you. So see you again July 10th, mate.
Cool, right. Nice one, Beez. Take it easy.
Zero hyperbole. Cycle of Suffering by Sylosis is absolutely essential listening if you love red-blooded metal and just out face shredding riffage. Cycle of Suffering by Sylosis is one of the albums of the year so far. Take my word for it. You can find them July the 10th, live.trivium.org, A Light or a Distant Mirror, Sylosis supporting Trivium. Okay, final interview from us on Mosh Talks this week comes from Andy Biersack from Black Veil Brides. I've been interviewing Andy since they very first came to the UK on the album that they have just re-recorded. It's We Stitch These Wounds is the name of their debut album. Re-Stitch These Wounds is coming out in a couple of weeks' time. Black Veil Brides went back to the studio, re-recorded their debut album. I asked Andy about why that happened and how that happened and how the experience was. And we talk a little bit about some tumultuous times with Black Veil Brides. I was very sad to see Andy considering the end of Black Veil Brides. He's one of the most passionate people for his art that you will find in the worlds of rock and metal. And he has lived, breathed, piss and shit Black Veil Brides for so long. So Black Veil Brides still here. 1st of August, they are going to be doing a live stream of their own at the Whiskey A Go Go. July 31st, Re-Stitch These Wounds comes out. And right now, Andy Biersack, a long, in-depth chat with myself, Beez, here on Mosh Talks. Final interview this week. I'll see you on the flip side, just so I can say goodbye. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Andy Biersack to Mosh Talks. Andy, it's been a couple of years. How you been, man?
I'm good. I haven't seen you in forever. It's, you know, this is the first time we've ever talked through a phone or the internet, so that's exciting.
We
normally we've spoken in person over the years, but yeah, this is a new thing. And congratulations on the new gig. This is awesome.
Thank you, man. And I think we're taking social distancing to a new level.
yeah. No, this all looks great, by the way. This whole little room that we're in, it's great.
Cool. Thanks so much.
I gotta learn how to do cool stuff like Knotfest, because for me, I do my podcast and it's just a Zoom room, so it's very exciting to do it this way.
I love the concept from the very beginning of the Andy show. Let me get to that at the very end, because I really want to talk to you about We Stitch These Wounds, or I should say Re-Stitch These Wounds, as you've re-recorded it. First things first, let's go back to the beginning. And when you actually recorded We Stitch These Wounds the first time around, you were literal kids. And this is as DIY as it gets when you were putting this together. Can you tell us a bit about how the album came together? And it's your debut, and you were so unbelievably you were so tied into a vision from the very beginning. Can you tell us about what it was like to put together your debut album in the first place?
Yeah, I was 18, recently turned 18, and I had moved to LA, and the whole concept was that I was going to try to find a way to make this idea that I had, because I grew up in Cincinnati, and there wasn't, I had people that I was close to, or different band members, and there was kind of like a revolving door in a way of people who would commit for a little while, and then something would come up in their life and they were no longer interested in being in a band full time or something like that. And so over time, it became clear to me that I wanted to go to LA full time. I came out here. I didn't have any money or any contacts. I just knew this is the idea. This is what we're going to do. And I had to find people, and it just I would just go around with here's what I think is the greatest idea in the world, and hopefully you agree with me. And that was kind of my daily pitch to people. And, being that I was, I've talked about this before, when I was that age, and that kind of age range in general, you don't really know who you are. But I was so full of, just venom for all of the shit that I had dealt with growing up, for people telling me that what I wanted to do wasn't viable or wasn't a realistic thing. And, people not really understanding what the concept of the band was, or the aesthetic or anything else, that I was hell-bent on making sure that it did work. And so I was fortunate enough to meet a group of people through time. Again, it wasn't like the first iteration of the band in LA was not the one that made the record, and the one that made the record isn't the one that went on tour. And there's different iterations until eventually we got to, by the time we were doing the full-fledged touring cycle for the record, that's kind of where you got to the lineup that lasted for a while. But to kind of talk more about the specifics of making the record, we had so little money and so little belief in us, except for kind of a core 3 or 4 people, that we were making this record on, I think our budget was like $6,000, which was more money than I could imagine at the time. I was pretty sure you could buy a house for $6,000. But you know, we were recording with some wonderful people who were working on other records at other studios, and they would essentially give us their nights after they'd go. So, you know, there was an engineer who was working on a Linkin Park record during the day, and then he would come at night, and my vocal hours to record vocals were between like 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. because that's all the time that we could book. So, you know, and I was writing melodies on the fly or changing things, and you know, it was a crazy time. And I'd show up in the middle of the night, try to track vocals. Hopefully it sounded decent. And we just didn't have the finances or the wherewithal to make the record the way we wanted it to sound. We just had to get something out that was our songs that we were really proud of. And really from the time the record was released to now, we have always thought, man, wouldn't it be great to do that record the way we wanted to? And that's, I think sometimes people don't understand. It's not that we were unhappy with the idea that the record was doing well and that we had found success, but we were unhappy with how it sounded from the minute we got it back. And it's not the fault of the people who were making the record. It's the fault of the fact that we didn't have the financial... I mean, we were recording in a literal jingle studio where they do like commercial jingles.
Oh, shit.
That's where we did it. And I recorded all my vocals in essentially a janitor's closet of that jingle studio. So, it's people go like, oh, it sounds really lo-fi and crappy. And I'm like, yeah, it does. But, you know, the other thing about it is I was so young. And I was just so into the idea of like, this is what we're going to do, that it didn't really affect us. And Jake and Jinx and I would sit in the shitty apartment that Jake and I shared and come up with demos and try to translate those demos into the studio recordings. And we did our best. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun to be able to go back and revisit that timeline and to kind of do it the way we wanted to, you know. Did
you always believe, Andy? Because this is a town that, like, I mean, I moved here. And it took 3 years to move anything, man. Like, this is a town, like, that is a lot of dreams are made, but there's a lot more broken dreams. When you come here, like, nothing but a dream from Cincinnati and a vision and sheer belief in what you were doing. How was the pre-Knives and Pens, like that little period first? Like, when you look back at it, exciting? Were you nervous? It always feels like you were having a blast with this, but was that the case?
Well, the truth is that, you know, I don't think, and I talked about this the other day online, I don't think you really know who you are until you have had more life experience. But I was pretty sure at 18 that I kind of knew everything. And that was almost more just like a pose in a way. Because I was, you know, like any teenager, I was insecure. I had my fears and anxieties. And I chased a lot of that away with trying to mimic behavior or act like the heroes that I had growing up. And not really, the other thing is that you don't really know anything about your heroes, particularly then. This is pre-social media. So I'm reading books about Motley Crue. I'm watching Behind the Music, or I'm watching Kiss interviews or whatever it is. And I'm basing what I think I should act like on those kinds of things. And so at that age, I don't think I ever thought enough about, you know, the kind of like the emotional or social side of the way I was acting, and more so just like horse with blinders. This is what I want to do. This is what it's going to look like. This is how it's going to be. And it worked to the degree that the wheels started moving pretty quickly, but because the wheels started moving so quickly, I think I kind of entered into this at a time before I really understood how to deal with it. And that's how you get to being 21, 22, 23 years old and just drunk all day long. And every show is about 4 songs and the rest of it's just yelling at people on stage. You know?
So what was the strip like at that time? Because the thing is, I've spoken to people from the hair metal era, and I've spoken to loads of people, because it was when I grew up, about the nu metal era, which I think is underrated when it comes to how much the strip had to do with it. Coming to LA and sounding the way that you did, what were the shows like in those early days?
Well, you know what's funny is like we were kind of like there was a resurgence in certain elements of that type of music, and it wasn't necessarily the way that we were, but there were other bands. Obviously, Steel Panther had picked up quite a bit at that point, so there was the kind of, and I love those guys, but there was kind of the more kitschy elements that people were more getting into that. They were doing they had moved from the Key Club to the House of Blues, and they were doing that every week, so there was kind of a love for that. our friends, we had friends in bands that had some success. Escape the Fate had succeeded to the degree that people knew who they were. But we were primarily treated as, the unproven or like the little brothers. It's particularly me because I was so young. I go to the Rainbow or these other places, and it wasn't like, I was celebrated in those places. It was more like, this is we're not sure of them yet. The irony, of course, now is that there's a big picture of me hanging outside the men's room in the Rainbow now. But but at the time, that we were not accepted by the LA community the way that I think historically, people are looking back now and think of like different bands in different times. People in LA now oftentimes associate us with that era, like we came up there. The truth of the matter is we couldn't get arrested in Hollywood. We could not get a show booked in Hollywood. We had to play in our Tony Alva's skate shop's parking lot was our first LA show because we were able to get that going. Like we had to make a stage in a parking lot to get a show. And we famously, there's a lot of people in the industry who are successful and work in big settings that I have had connection with in the last several years or through the years, who would say things like, well, it's not 1984, nobody wants this. I mean, there's a huge booking agent that is very well known that we got an email back kind of like they were pitching us, and it was just like, no one is going to listen to this. And so that also spurred on the, by the time I'm in England and by the time I'm meeting you, this is several years of no one wants this, you're terrible, you suck, you can't sing, the band's awful, and then the other part of it is that you have to understand, and I'm sure that you're familiar with it just by virtue of the fact that we've talked so much. There were many people who we met and would be endeared to the band's personality, but then would say awful things about the band's music on their own shows or whatever when we weren't there. And so that was also something that I was hearing, and it was filling my kind of ears of like, I have to be able to prove this. We have to be able to prove this. And so by the time We Stitch These Wounds comes out and we're touring in a van and we're broken, we're trying to get enough money for McDonald's, the only thing that was satiating us was, fuck you. Like, we're going to do this.
Yeah. Did that make you scrappier, though? Because, there was a real punk spirit that existed within your band at that point in time. Do you think that, things like the booking agent, things like being at the strip and being the part and seeing what you were seeing with Escape the Fate but not being accepted, do you think that added a bit of a curled lip snarl to Black Veil Brides in those early days?
Well, yeah, but I also think that that's just been... I've often said that the early part of my career was 100%, I wouldn't say 100%, was primarily about revenge. It was so much about, no, fuck you. Because, from the time I'm little, I'm telling people this is what I'm going to do, and people say that that's not going to happen. And that's not, my story is not uncommon. It's not, and this is what I've always liked to say, is that, I believe that sometimes artists and musicians have this weird sense of entitlement, like the ones who succeed are somehow, we were granted to the world by God, and we have a special skill set that no one else has. I felt because I didn't open my mouth and sing like a wonderful opera singer, because the music was different to what was happening, because we looked different to how people thought we sounded, or people didn't like what we were doing, because we're on the cover of magazines as the world's most hated band, all that stuff. I felt like we were qualified to be able to speak for the people that were listening to us in the way that many bands aren't, that went out there and acted as if like they were anointed and placed in this position. My standpoint has always been, there is absolutely nothing spectacular about me or remarkable. I just happen to really want to work harder than someone else to get something. And so that added a considerable amount of snarl to those early days, because you're going, well, if you don't believe in me, that is inconsequential, because I'm going to show you. And a big part of that, though, is the audience. You have to have the audience, and we lucked out in that other people, particularly younger people in that time, felt the same way we did and saw what I was saying in interviews and listened to the band's music and gravitated towards different personality types in the band and propped us up, so that it didn't matter that the movers and shakers didn't like what we were doing. Doors were knocked down by virtue of the fans. If we weren't going to get good reviews in magazines, we were going to win all of their awards because it was fan voted. You know what I mean? Basically, our audience removed the necessity to be the darlings of anything. And so while we have never been, it really has never mattered, because they've propped us up to that point.
There's weird synchronicity in life that you are, much like myself, a diehard Kiss fan, right? And
Sure,
it's almost built into you. It's almost like people are trying to stop you from liking Kiss. That's how you feel as a Kiss fan. And just for everyone out there, like I was working in England at the time, and the emergence of Black Veil Brides is one of the most fascinating things to happen in my entire time of working in this business. Because I love the Murder Dolls, right? I love that first record. I was salivating for the Murder Dolls to come back, right?
Yeah.
But when that tour happened, because it had been a bunch of years, tickets were slow. And then Black Veil Brides were added to it, and it sold out everywhere. And then you were on the cover of Kerrang! It was like I keep my ear to the ground, and I had never even heard of Black Veil Brides, and then bam, there it was. Did you feel when did that fuck you stop? Because I can relate to that. Like, I think when you come from somewhere that isn't glamorous and all the rest of it, I think that fuck you is ingrained in you. Has that fuck you ever died off?
No, it's just changed. There's, it's about, I want to work harder than the person next to me. And I want to show people now that it's possible to not act like a big prick and still be a rock star. I want to be able to show that the personality of what I really am, the guy who sits in a room surrounded by nerd memorabilia and, doesn't drink and doesn't, smoke cigarettes anymore. All the things that were part of my aesthetic, I can still very much be that person because I am still angry as hell about the world or things just inherently. I'm grumpy and I want things to be different but I try not to be such a prick all the time. And that's a big part of it. So I think that the fuck you's still there, but I can remember the moment where it started to become a caricature of itself, which is, it was probably the second headline tour we'd ever done in the UK. And the band was growing and growing and growing. And we were playing in Newcastle and the whole crowd is happy that we're there. But I was so used to at the time, we were coming off of opening for Avenged Sevenfold, we're coming off of opening for Motley Crue, where 60% of the audience every night was just there to throw beer cans at us because they had heard that everybody hates us. Not even listen to what we were doing, just immediately, as soon as the first note hits, they know this guy's going to make a big scene if I throw something at him. Let's do this. And that had been what we were. So we go to England and we do the first headline tour of this run. And we're in Newcastle and I'm just storming around the stage and I'm pissed off and I'm looking for a fight. And I look to the stage left and our longtime tour manager, John, is standing over there and he's just laughing at me. And I'm what? And he goes that everyone here is happy that you're here. You don't need to look around to pick a fight. Like, no one is flipping you off. No one's throwing anything at you like that. And it resonated with me, the idea that I had spent so long looking to be the guy who was causing problems or to defend myself, that I was not enjoying the moments that were positive. And that's, I would say, if there's one regret, and I try not to live with a lot of regrets in terms of career stuff because you make different decisions, but the one, slight regret that I do have is I spent so much time in my late teens and early 20s mad instead of enjoying the things that we had. Looking back, it's funny and people laugh at me inviting the entire main stage crowd to bottle us at Download in 2012. But I also don't remember a lot of that show because, again, I was drinking a lot and I was more focused on the anger instead of looking out at this huge crowd and enjoying that moment. So I'm trying now to still have that fuck you in me, but also enjoy the moments that are positive.
Highly relatable, man. I've got to ask about the decision to re-record this record. When listening to the original version this weekend, it's not that the songs are lacking; it's that it needs more muscle. Like this is here. Like I'm a sucker for Anthrax did the greater of two evils. That is John Bush recording the Joey Belladonna stuff. So sometimes a modern production really does befit it, but when you've recorded it for $6,000, is that the primary thinking behind it? Is that these songs deserve more?
This started in 2013. We knew immediately when we got the record done. There's two records that, and I don't want to talk shit about it, but there's 2 records in our career that I remember listening to it. One was listening to the record done in the car, and then the other one was hearing the first single on the radio and going like, oh, this is very small and crappy. But it's already too late. So we already knew right away. And then by the time that we had made Set the World on Fire, and then when we made Wretched and Divine, and the band was really cooking, and we knew sonically where we wanted to go, and Jake and I started having conversations then, because Jake had already gotten really heavily into production at that point, because he was already recording the guitar parts for the band on Wretched and Divine. A lot of people don't necessarily know that while Feldman produced it, Jake did do production and recorded all the guitar parts for that, as well as Jinx doing all the string parts. So that the band was already getting into producing our own music to a certain degree at that point. So we had gone to the label who basically owned the rights to that record. We were only with that label for a very short period of time. We had joined Universal really prior to the end of the first record's tour cycle. So we approached them and said, we'd like to re-record this. We'll release it on your label. We're going to get the go-ahead from Universal, and it's going to be all good. They didn't want to do that because they thought it would eat into profits of the original recording. And so, or at least that's what I was told through the grapevine. Sometimes it's complicated because I never spoke to the owner of that label about it. It was more just like lawyer. Here's what we want to do. So we just decided to wait, and there's a statute of limitations on those things of when you can actually re-record your material. And we waited for that to happen. And then around 2018, it became clear that that's what we were going to do. And, that was also a very tumultuous time in the band. And Veil had been set up in a way to kind of almost be a chapter closing on a certain era of the band. And we thought maybe this would be a way to re-record it and then figure out whether we were going to even move forward as a band, because, we were fairly unhappy with certain situations that were happening. And so we didn't know what we were going to do. I had been doing Andy Black for a number of years, and we talked about maybe doing this re-record, and then kind of that would be it. And then ultimately there were some changes made in the band. Everything got reinvigorated. We got so excited to do not only this, but in the process of re-recording this, we wrote 2 new songs just while doing it. We wrote the songs that ended up being The Night and released those. And then we worked on this, and it just became like, wow, this is really exciting. And now listening back, we were listening in the car yesterday, my wife and I were, and it's just so much fun to hear songs like Carolyn and these other songs that on that record we could hear in our minds where it should go, but we just didn't have the resources. And frankly, I didn't have the vocal prowess then to be able to carry those things off, because when I was writing the melodies then, I'm writing things for basically the lowest level of my register, because I wasn't ready to challenge myself yet. And so it was actually, I would say that's the hardest part of the re-record, was singing some of those melody lines that I wrote at 17, 18, because I'm like, what in the world is this? Like, this doesn't make any damn sense. And it's all so one note that it was hard to try to kind of like make it more exciting. And I think we did. I mean, people have heard Sweet Blasphemy now, and they'll be hearing more, but the goal was to keep it true to the originals. But just, we've been playing a lot of these songs live for years. So it's like, how have we been doing it currently?
I will go back to the re-record, but you can't be flippant about the fact that you were considering giving up Black Veil Brides. I've not spoken to you for a couple of years, but to me that is so alien, knowing how much of yourself that you put in to your art. Were there serious discussions about I'm not sure if Black Veil's the way anymore?
I wouldn't say that there were serious discussions. It just felt like it, for a lot of reasons, it felt like, and most of which, I don't want to get too much into, but it felt like it just felt stuck. And things were not fun anymore. There was 2 separate buses, and for instance, during the Resurrection tour, I literally would only see the band on stage. And then I would, because there were certain parts of what was happening that I wasn't pleased and wasn't happy. And over time, it became important to me to go like, well, I don't want this just to fade out. So we did Veil under the guidelines that this is going to be, we're going to close the chapter on the storyline that we had started with Wretched and Divine, but also we're going to take the time to write a story that maybe could be a completion, and so it was never discussed. It was never like, oh, this is going to be the end of the band. It was more so just a feeling. Like, I think that we had shared, and you know, there was never discussions about it, or what are we going to do next. There was never a like, oh, this is the end of it. It was more so just that there wasn't the spark. I talk about it in the last song on Veil. The fire had faded away. You know, there wasn't the connection of the members wasn't there. There was something in our kind of in the world that we were existing in that didn't feel right anymore. And so unless we could change that, and unless we could find a way to get out of that feeling that we had, and with that situation that we were in, it didn't seem like we could move forward. And so the re-record then moved from a fun thing to maybe it's a, you know, the snake eating its tail kind of thing. Maybe we start or maybe we finish where we started. And again, these weren't conversations that were had directly, but ultimately I went and did a handful of solo tours. And the primary reason for me doing a lot of the solo things was, yes, because I wanted to make different types of music, but also because there was something within the band that I was unhappy with, and I wanted to be able to expand my life and to tour without being kind of unhappy. And similarly for Jake and his solo projects, and Jinx working on film scores, and CC working on different things like that, there was the feeling of let's just figure out if we still love making music like this, and then get back together. And so prior to the last solo tour that I did, which now is quite a long time ago since no one tours anymore, but we got together and had lunch and just said, look, let's try to make these changes, and if we can, and let's not give up on this. And then we started recording, and we just, you know, it sounds like hyperbolic, but we just fell in love again. You know, that's the truth. As brothers, as friends, you know, there has never been this level. I would say, because people say, oh, it feels like the old days. This is better than it's ever been. It's Jake and I used to live together, and we didn't have this close of a friendship. You know, now I'm texting these guys all day long. We're sending each other gifts and funny things. We're hanging out on a consistent basis. We're, you know, obviously now we can't really as often go over to each other's homes as we like, but prior to that, we were, you know, everybody was coming over to the house to watch football on Sundays, and there's a connection within the band that we haven't had. And obviously a big part of it is, and I know this is a really long answer, but a big part of it comes down to Lonnie Eagleton, who's the bass player in the band. I had hired Lonnie basically sight unseen, based on the fact that I was behind on hiring a band for the Ghost of Ohio tour. And at the 11th hour, my appendix ruptures, and I end up in the hospital for a couple days. And we're supposed to start rehearsals like within a day of that. So I have to pull the trigger on somebody. Lonnie winds up being the suggestion of a former guy who I had hired to play drums, a friend of ours. And we see sends a video to Blasco. Blasco says he looks cool. Blasco tells me, as my manager says, he looks like Steve Stevens. So I said, oh, okay, cool. All right. Can he play? Goes, oh yeah, he can totally shred. He plays really well. He played They Don't Need to Understand perfectly. And I said, you know what? Let's do it. So I go to rehearsals. Well, I've got a cane because I can barely fucking stand up because my whole insides are all crazy. And I go to rehearsals and I meet this kid, and he's just like, he's the sweetest person I've ever met. And he's just so, within minutes of meeting me, he goes, hey, can I take you aside for a minute? And I go, oh, sure. He goes, I have all these stage close ideas that I wanted to run by you. I wanted to make sure that it was cool with you, but I've really been thinking about it. And he's got this whole like fucking Pinterest board of ideas for how he'd like to look for the Ghost of Ohio tour, taking the comic book into account that I had written, taking all these different ideas into account. And it was just like, it struck me as so just like cool, because, you know, this is not to say anything bad about anybody else, but the concept of hired guns generally is these are guys who are professional musicians who show up and do the gig. They kind of, they go, hey, what do I wear for this? And you go, hey, a black t-shirt. Then they do it, and then that's kind of it. And we get along on the road, but it's not a band. Lonnie immediately was like, oh, I'm in the Andy Black band. Like, this is, you know what I mean? Like, this is what I want to do. And we go on tour, and within a couple shows, I remember telling my manager, hey, if a situation occurs down the line where I need to have somebody who to play with me in some case, like, I always want this dude around me. Like, he's professional, he plays great, he's just, everything about him is like just fun to be around, and he's so sweet, and he's just like, the way I describe him is he's like a new person. Like, he was just sculpted recently. Like, he has no baggage at all. There's no There's nothing about him that's sarcastic. He's the kind of person that, like, if you were trying to fuck with him and you were like, hey, why'd you do that? He would just say sorry, and it's agonizing because you're like, no, I'm trying to fuck with you. But what happened was, one day I'm on the bus, and by the way, I don't know any of this about him, but one day I'm on the bus and I walk by the bunk alley and I can hear my voice coming out of his bunk, like my speaking voice. And I kind of peek down and I go, hey, what are you listening to? And I look at his phone and he's watching the Andy Show. And I was like, oh, that's neat. Checking out my pockets, he goes, yeah, I've been a subscriber for about 3 years or something. And I go, really? And then it comes out slowly that he is like a Black Veil Bride's super fan, like mega fan of the band, knows everything about us, such a big fan. And so and you have to understand at the time, I'm kind of apathetic to the whole idea of that era of the band. And so I start sitting with him and talking to him about, well, what is it about this band that you love so much? What is it about this band that inspired you so much? Not to try to like satiate my ego, but to find out from someone who's roughly the same age as me, what inspired you about us? Why, and what did you see? And I find out basically I start hearing about the impact that we had in ways that I didn't know. And it started to make me excited about going through records with him and going like, well, what's your favorite song on that record? Why do you like that? And then telling him stories about the days of recording that or our first tours in different countries or those kind of things. And so it became a situation where every day I got a little bit more affinity built for the idea of the band. And then I played a show in LA. Jake, Jinx, and CC come out to the show. I tell them, look, guys, he's going to freak out when he meets you. And I've given him all kinds of fake information about you guys, so just to be funny and like, play along. And so he's so excited to meet them, and he's so nervous, and they're excited to meet him, and they all fall in love with him as well. And it just becomes a thing where like he immediately endears himself to everybody. And I think that night I tried to get him on stage. I kind of put him on the spot, and I was like, hey, we got your guitar heroes are in the crowd tonight, Lonnie. Why don't you show off for him? And like, of course, total like silly moment where his guitar wasn't even like plugged in, or he was changing guitars, and so he like tries to do something, but it's like clink, 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 and it was like super embarrassing. But
like on Guitar Hero when you're missing the notes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because he was nervous, and But the point is just like he was. First time we went to England, he doesn't stop looking out the bus window because he's fascinated that he's in England. Like everything is exciting to him, and playing these venues that I had played 100 times are suddenly new experiences because I'm getting to see the world of touring through his eyes. And I just felt like that's the dynamic that we needed in the band. And what is true is once we started working together, everyone in the band started feeling that same way. The idea of being around this person who was A, exceptionally talented, B, exceptionally kind, and C, a big fan of the band was a helpful thing. This is a person that when I asked him if he wanted to be the bass player in the band, I had a call with everybody and I said, hey guys, I'm about to tell him. So he was staying at our house, and my wife Juliet's down in the kitchen with him, and they're sitting there having like lunch or whatever. And I come down the stairs and I go, hey Lonnie, I got something to tell you. Because when I had him come to LA when he was going to meet with everybody to have lunch to tell him he was going to be in the band, I didn't tell him why he was there. So for like the 24 hours beforehand, we would go. I was like, hey, do you want to run some errands with me? And I think we went to like the gas station or something. And he goes, is this why I'm here? Like he kept asking, is this why I'm here for all these different things? And so I go, hey, I want to tell you the reason that you're here. And he goes, what is it? And I said, do you want to be the bass player in Black Veil Brides? And he, like, I don't want to say he was like bawling, but he got emotional and he was like, oh my God, are you serious? And it was an incredible, like, I don't want to be so like self-aggrandizing, like, oh, I've gifted this guy something. It was just incredible to feel like for so many times in my life, I felt like my instincts were right. And I feel like this was a time where I could humble myself to know that I was wrong and that the band did have a significant impact for the right reasons. And that this is a person who is such a kind and wonderful person. We've influenced him. And then he goes to me, he goes, hey, I never wanted to tell you this because I thought it would make you like think less of me or that I was like too much of a super fan. But he shows me like on the backside of his arm or like somewhere where I couldn't really tell, he's got all the lyrics to In the End tattooed on his arm. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. So it's just like every day has just been, the first photo shoot was like the movie Rockstar where he wouldn't stop smiling and we were, trying to get him not to smile. The first video shoot, he's just like looking around smiling. We played the first show in Mexico City, and it was like it was the most joyous situation ever. You look over on the stage and you see this guy who's just beaming, looking at thousands of people, and it's a wonderful scenario. And I can't overstate how important it's been to the dynamic of the band, and how, if this band was going to continue for the next decade and the next decade after that, this is what needed to happen.
So it's such a small world. After you played your LA show, I was at a club in Hollywood, and I bumped into Jake after the show. And he was actually talking about recording music, and was really, really in the zone talking about it. So when you boil up all of these elements and it all goes into the studio with a labor of love that is your, Knives and Pens is, I saw the comments the other day when you released Sweet Blasphemy, and everyone was like, this is awesome, where's Knives and Pens? When you take that all into the studio, do you feel that on the recording? Because I love hearing that there was a personal renaissance within the band, and that a spark that, if not wasn't out, was kind of fading, suddenly went into an inferno again. It must have been a hell of an experience.
Yeah, it's just nice to be able to make music where everyone in the room is contributing and having fun. That makes a big difference, and you can feel every song. You can feel the purpose of what you're doing. And we've been now working. We completed the Restitch record a couple months ago, and we've been working on new material since then. And all of it, there's just this feeling of this is fun again. This is exciting. This is a fun time to be doing this. And for me to be able to be, in the final year of my 20s, and to be able to kind of start over again, it's a really exciting thing. It feels like it should. And I would say that doing songs like Knives and Pens or Perfect Weapon, and these things, doing them in this context made them feel like new songs. It made it feel like it was almost like we knew that we were recording old songs, and I wanted to be vocally true to the previous material, but it also felt like the energy from doing Saints of the Blood and The Vengeance and those other songs at the same time, it felt like it was all part of a new record that we were making. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can see that. And one of the biggest things when you tell me this story, and if it does feel like a kind of line in the sand on the first era, the first chapter of Black Veil Brides, have you started writing music for what's next? Because 2 years since Veil now, right?
Yeah, I mean we've got 6 songs done and about 15 other ideas. Maybe 2 of those songs are mixed and what we would consider like a song. But it's a concept record that is to me as big in scope as we've ever done. I started it with kind of the way that Wretched and Divine started, where it was just the story came first. But this time around, I wanted to have as much and as dense amount of material as possible heading into the writing process. So I did a lot of illustrations. I did a lot of character design. I did a lot of costume design. I did a lot of descriptions. I did a lot of research into the different timelines that I'm trying to build up within this story. And so I've got the Bible of that story that I carry around to the studio. If we go to different places to try to, go to the label or wherever else to have meetings, I'm carrying around this leather-bound notebook that has pages of drawings and stories and everything else. And that to me is also something that hasn't been since 2012 when we did Wretched and Divine. There's been that level of here's the idea, this is what we're doing, and let's build off of this. And that's also helped quite a bit, because for me, there was kind of this realization for me that when we did Wretched and Divine, it felt like this was the way that I was meant to write songs. In ways that We Stitch These Wounds works because it's on a lyrical level, it's the thoughts of an 18-year-old, right? Set the World on Fire, to me, maybe half of it works. The rest of it is a lot of a 19, 20-year-old's conjecture of the way the world is. And then by the time we do Wretched and Divine, I'm applying the thoughts of my life and the experiences I have to a narrative story that I can build out and create in my mind, allegorical tales as opposed to at 20 years old trying to tell everybody how I see the world. You know what I mean? And so when we did the Bob Rock record, I kind of shifted back to writing more personal stories, and then a lot of Veil is about just goodbyes in general and trying to get out of situations that you don't want to be in. And now there's just so much that's happened in our world and in our life. It feels like it's a good time to take these stories and put them into this kind of allegory and this big story, broad story that we can try to build out and do comic books and feature and everything we want to do with it.
I'm always excited when you've got other things building around the art itself as well. 2 final questions then. Firstly, you're playing the Whiskey on the 1st of August, putting out a live stream event, like everyone can watch it no matter where you are in the world. What's your take on streamed events at the moment? Because like my podcast took a question this week, it was like, are people ready to pay for live streamed events? I'm personally involved with the Trivium one that's coming. I just bought the Papa Roach one that happened a week ago. What is your take on where the world is at the moment with regards to live shows? I know it's a mad point in human history to be asking,
sure.
but is it just a case of, look, this is an event. We've got, this is the year that this record is 10. We've got to do something.
Yeah, I mean, well, the original plan was to do a handful of club shows at the venues that we played on this tour, and to do like 3 or 4 nights in some cases in different places in these really small clubs. No production. We wanted to recreate the merchandise from that tour. That was the whole plan, and we were going to do it as a surprise. We weren't going to announce it huge in advance. We were going to announce it kind of around the time and do a couple on the West Coast, try to head around and do that. That was our plan for how we were going to roll this out. Obviously, that couldn't happen. We found that out very early on. So we said, well, what's the one that we can do from this tour? And we ended this tour at the Whiskey. That was how the tour ended. That was the last show of the run for that tour. And it was a notable show for us. And it was one where it was the first time I met John Feldman. It was the first, like it was our, as close as you can come to like the crowning achievement for a band that pulled up to the venue in a van. Do you know what I mean? Like there was people that were in the industry that was there. There was buzz about us. It was the first time LA had accepted that we were going to not go away. You know what I mean? Within that first year of the band. Or at least not then, you know, and there were people there. It was an exciting time. So we thought, well, we can at very least do that. And then obviously the idea became, well, we can't anymore. So how do we figure out a way to do a show of the Whiskey and have people watch it and not be there? And then we were approached by, these companies that Veeps and these other companies that are doing this. And it became like, oh, that makes sense. And I'll tell you this, I didn't know anything about the live stream concert experience from the perspective of what it was like as a fan. I knew that for the better part of the last several months, I've been working every day on the logistics end. I've been talking to our crew members that are going to be working the show, the lighting companies that are going to be facilitating the lights, the venue itself, the camera crew, all the back end logistics. But from the purely fan part, I did not experience it or know what it was going to be like. And so Telly from The Word Alive is a person in my life. He's been with my sister-in-law for some time, and we love Telly, and it's a member of our family basically. And so I saw that he had mentioned that The Word Alive was doing a show, and I was very curious just from a fan perspective of how I just wanted to buy a ticket, watch it on my phone, see how easy the website was to use, see what the experience was like, and how kind of user-friendly the experience was. And I was fucking thrilled. Like it was so exciting for me, just as like, obviously we've toured with that band a million times through Warped Tours and everything else, but to watch their set with crystal clear audio, with an amazing light show, it felt like I was at a concert. And for me, as someone who does not leave my house very often, it felt great to be able to watch my friend's band while I was in my house. You know what I mean? Like it was... Yeah. I told him, I said, this was the perfect experience for like a grumpy grumpus like me, who if you invite me to your show, it's very likely that I'll be like, oh, I'd love to come, but I have to go to sleep right. You know what I mean? Like I don't really go to shows. Not because I don't like live music, but because I'm an early to bed, early to rise kind of guy. And a lot of those things I don't want to go down to. I don't live very close to Hollywood in the way that I used to. And so it's just harder. But to be able to watch my friend's band, a whole set, great audio, it felt great. So I was, from that moment on, I was like jacked up and excited because I was like, this is gonna be great and work, and I think people are gonna really enjoy this, you know.
Yep. So 1st of August is your show at the Whiskey, just in case everyone's watching.
Yes.
Final question then. So it's been a couple of years, and like one of the things that I've found most fascinating watching from afar has been the Andy show, Andy Black, Black Veil Brides. It feels like you are constantly on the go, and I know that's very in keeping with who you are as a human and your work ethic. But when it comes to creativity, do you feel creatively fulfilled right now?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that for the last the beginning part of the pandemic, it was hard to find what to do because I couldn't do much of anything. You know, I couldn't make plans because the plans would have to change. I could do my podcast, and that's kind of what I leaned into from a creative perspective. But on like the level of my passion is to build a world, to make something that wasn't there before. And I was incapable of doing that the way that I have for every year of my adult life. We're doing shows, and I think it was Gerard Way that said that, you know, the live music is one of the greatest art forms because you can change it every night. Unlike a painting that stays there and exists on the wall, you can change what your painting is every night in a different city. And to not be able to do that anymore was difficult to stay creatively motivated. So much so that I became obsessed with weird little tasks. I painted my closet black and made sure that I had every cowl from every Batman film and displayed them with under lights and made it into a Batcave in my closet. No one will ever go into my closet except for me and maybe my wife to put something in there or whatever else. When I invite people over to my house, I don't go upstairs and go, hey, come into my closet. But I needed something to do. So for about 2 weeks, I spent all my time figuring out how to wire LED lights, how to make them turn on gradually as you walk further into the room, how to affix these cowls like this to the wall so that they look like they would in a Batman movie. I got the utility belts up and everything, and painted all the walls and everything. And now that's just done. Like when I finished it, it was so sad because I was like, well, now what the fuck do I do now? So thankfully, once I finished that, I found out that we were allowed to do a lot more things moving forward. So, you know, the release of this and the show and everything else. So otherwise, I think I'd just be painting more rooms.
What are you saying about Robert Pattinson as Batman?
I don't know. I think that people get a little bit up in arms about a lot of things they don't know about. And I think that if one thing we've seen through kind of comic movie fandom over the years is that we don't really know anything until we know. You know, there's certain people that I would have said that I would have bet more money on the fact that I would have been impressed by Jared Leto's Joker coming off of like Dallas Buyers Club and everything else. Yeah. And not to say that he didn't have much of an opportunity in the movie because so much of his stuff was cut out, but I did not like that interpretation. You know what I mean? That's just my personal opinion. Whereas most people felt like coming off of like 10 Things I Hate About You, Heath Ledger was not going to be what he was. And now, of course, one of the most iconic roles in film history. Yep. So it's impossible to know. I think he's got the look and everything else. The photos of the suit that I've seen, I don't like. So I just don't know. I don't know. We'll see.
Did you enjoy the Harley movie? I thought it took a lot of shit. I really enjoyed it. I think maybe it's because on a visual level, like aesthetically, the use of colours and the blah of it all is so my taste. Like, were you into it?
I have absolutely no idea why anybody didn't like it, other than the fact that there's a lot of very sensitive men who got worried about not having a positive male role model in the movie, which I feel is a little ridiculous since you have every other superhero movie. I mean, it feels a little insane that I literally saw people complaining that they didn't have a nice white guy to cheer for in the movie. Like, come on, like, haven't you gotten the entire genre forever? Isn't it time for other people to have an opportunity to be represented in some way? So anyway, I love the movie, but I'm also equally pissed off by the backlash because it makes absolutely no sense to me at all.
Right, we're going to just cut this interview here because I just want to ask you loads of more questions like that. Bye, everyone. Don't forget, Restitch These Wounds is out July 31st. The live show happens at the Whiskey on August 1st. Andy, always a pleasure to have you on the show, man.
Thanks, bud. Yeah, happy to be here.
There he is, Andy Biersack. I really do love chatting to him. He's one of the most passionate people within rock and metal. And I do wish Black Veil Brides all the best. So thank you to Matt from Trivium, Caleb from Beartooth, to Frank Maddocks, art director with the Deftones, Josh Middleton from Sylosis, and of course Andy Biersack for being here on Mosh Talks this week. Keep it locked on notfest.com every single day. We keep you up to date with the news and everything that's going on. There was an awesome feature that went up this week with Corey Taylor talking about 21 years of the the self-titled Slipknot album. And I will be back next Tuesday for more Mosh Talks. I should say again, Trivium's A Light or a Distant Mirror happening July the 10th, live.trivium.org to buy tickets. I'll see you there, but, I'll see you next Tuesday for more Mosh Talks. Thanks for being with us, and see you next week.